We are going to take a look at some of the string methods in this video. So we've just created a few variables that are strings and created a prompt for the user to enter their name, and we have a program that's going to just ask for a name, input a name, and it echoes that name. We are going to look at some of the substrings that we have in our library. I said substring, but some of the methods I meant to say, and substring is one that we want to look at. In our content that we're looking at this week, we have some properties from, and the list that I showed you is the docs.microsoft.com. That has everything that you want to know about strings. If you take a look at it, it is quite extensive. They have examples, they have different methods, etc. So take a little bit of time to look at this, but if you want to do anything with a string, this would be the place to go to. We are going to look at just a couple of them right now. We're going to look at substring, and we will also look at maybe what ToLower, ToUpper, and then how do you start to just play around with this and investigate a little bit more on your own. Okay, so first of all, when we're going to output this string, I just outputted the first name and I echoed it. But anytime you want to change that format or whatever, and you want to use a method that is on a string, you can use the dot operator in your code, and that dot operator is then going to pull up all of the methods that you can apply to this object. So I can use all of these. So if I try to do, now it says there's a ToLower, I might want to try a ToUpper. This is how you guys can play around a little bit with the output and just kind of see what's going to happen. So I'm going to say do a ToUpper and see what that does with my output. And so when I input the name Fred, then it takes Fred to all uppercase. And so to call the methods in the string class, you use a dot operator, and then you can just apply the method that you want. Now many times, and actually I'm going to just speed this up a little bit, and instead of reading in Fred each time, I'm just going to assign that variable, so then I don't have to execute and do input every single time. And I will comment out this where it says what is your first name, because I'm just going to have it execute and run. So now many times you just want to pull off the first character or the first initial, and so I could take the first initial from first name by doing a substring. So I'm going to do a dot operator, and then I'm going to start to type in sub, and it pulls up that method. And if you start to learn how to read this IntelliSense, it gives you an idea over here of how to execute it. It brings up that documentation. So I'm going to do a substring. So I double click on that, or I hit tab, left parens, and then it's telling me start index. Well, I want to start at the beginning, and in programming the beginning index is at 0, and then this tells me the length. So if you learn how to read this, what we call IntelliSense, it's showing you how to use this method. So I want to pull off one character. So I've got the name, and then I'm just going to write down, I'm going to also then do the first character, just to show that I have that first character, okay? And its first initial is the variable that I gave it, and until I use that variable, I also have to declare it as a string because I declared it on the fly here, and I need to learn how to spell. And I'm going to make sure I put a space in there. So if we run this now, we should get the first name in all uppercase, and then I should get the first initial. Now, first character is F, lowercase, hello Fred. So they look different because I did ToUpper on the whole entire first name with this line of code right here, but I pulled the first initial from, I didn't save the fact that I did it all uppercase. So if I want to make the first initial upper, I can apply ToUpper to just that first initial, and that will change the first initial to an uppercase. And then what happens is then I have the first character is just F. Now what happens though is I really want to output, what I want to output is Fred uppercase and then R-E-D, or the F uppercase and then the rest of it lowercase. So the first initial is going to be ToUpper, and then I'm going to concatenate the rest of the name. So I'm going to concatenate first name dot substring starting at position 1, and if I don't put in any other arguments, it takes from that index. It starts at the specified character and continues to the end of the string, and that's what I want. It's just the rest of the string. Close off my parens, and now it should write this name in what we would call proper case. And proper case would be the first initial is capitalized and then the rest of it is lowercase. So if I want to capitalize just the first letter and then concatenate the rest of the name, this is how we do that. So we're going to capitalize the first initial and then we're just going to concatenate the rest of the name. Now if you wanted to, we would not have to store this to a variable. I could take and use more than one method on that first initial. For example, I could do first initial. Excuse me, I need to back up. I'm going to do first name dot substring. I hit a tab to use it in IntelliSense. Position 0, position 1, dot ToUpper. So I can put together more than one method on an object, or on my variable. First name dot substring ToUpper, and that's going to execute the same thing. It kind of depends on how you want to design your program. If in your program for some reason you need to use that first initial later on, I would store it to a variable. If you don't need to use that first initial later on, then you can go ahead and just do your formatting here in the output statement. So that gives you an example of how to use substring using a beginning index and how many characters you want to pick up, and also using substring starting at a particular index and going to the end of the line. The only thing we didn't do as far as an example would be to pull off more characters. We only pulled off one character here, and so just to show how to pull off multiple characters when you're using substring. Let's say that I want to pull off the first two letters for some reason. Then you could do first name dot substring 0 is where I'm going to start, comma 2, and then if I wanted to make it uppercase or lowercase I could, and I should give this a little bit of a prompt so that we know what it's doing. This is just going to be 2 characters of a string, and it's the first 2 characters of a string, and so when it outputs, it should output just FR. Okay, so if I execute that, my last output is 2 characters of the string is just FR, and so that's how you can pull off 2 characters at a time if you want. And so this is the first digit here is where you start, and the second one is how many. If I change this to a 1, the index on my string, if I'm using Fred, and actually, if I'm using Fred, then it's going to start at R, and let's actually pull off 3 characters. And so if I execute that, I'm going to start at position 1 in Fred and pull off the next 3 characters, and so it's going to be red. Now my prompt doesn't make sense because I didn't change that, but that's how you can also use substring then to pull off a variety of different pieces within that string.